Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm State Senator Todd Kaminsky, and welcome you to this virtual roundtable about teen cyberbullying, a growing problem and a growing threat to the safety and health of our young people. And I feel that, and I think everyone will agree on this panel, that we need to do more as a society and as a state to address it. So today we're going to hear from some people who have a national view, some people who are on the ground, some people who have had various issues directly with it, and we're going to come up with some solutions that we in the state of New York can advance. So I'd like everyone to introduce themselves to our audience, starting with Dr. Scott Poland. And make sure you unmute, please.
Thank you very much. I direct the Suicide and Violence Prevention Office at NSU, Florida. I worked full-time in schools for 26 years. I began writing about suicide prevention 40 years ago, and have authored or co-authored 5 books and numerous chapters. I'm extremely interested in the relationship between bullying and suicide. It's complex, but there is a strong association between bullying and suicide. I've been involved in a number of legal cases where schools were sued as an expert witness, and I talk to parents very often about the importance of being involved in their child's life, taking charge of that technology. And just in the last week, I did a parenting session for Baltimore County schools and for the schools in Aledo, Texas, about their important involvement in their children's lives.
Well, thank you, and we're lucky to have you. Laura Campbell, can you please briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you. So I'm Laura Campbell, Director of Education at Long Island Crisis Center. We are a 24/7 crisis intervention agency. We have over 1,000 resources in our database. I oversee the community education, so I am actively in the schools. I would be the person to go to a school after a loss by suicide, and I have also presented on cyberbullying in many Long Island schools, as well as conferences, and spoken to students in crisis where bullying was the precipitating event for suicidal thoughts, for depression, for self-harm. So I'm happy to be here, part of the solution.
Thank you very much. Sue Mahler?
Hi, I'm Sue Muller. I'm a high school guidance counselor at Lynbrook. This is my 18th year as a high school guidance counselor, and I'm happy to be here as well.
Thank you. Teresa Tebbett from the Nassau District Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Senator Kaminsky, and thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. I'm an assistant district attorney at the Nassau DA's office. Obviously, we handle cases that would involve the prosecution of cyberbullying, but another initiative by DA Singas is to do outreach and education as a crime prevention strategy, particularly in our schools with our young people, and do presentations on how to recognize cyberbullying, what to do if you're a victim of cyberbullying, and other issues that cover online safety. So I'm happy to be here as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Jeff Reynolds?
Hi, I'm Jeff Reynolds. I'm President and CEO of Family and Children's Association. We provide more than 30 different programs across Nassau County and serve about 30,000 families per year. Most germane to this conversation, we run a large children's mental health program, and one of the things that we picked up on is the incredible mental health needs associated with kids today and how that intersects with cyberbullying. So thanks for having me, and thanks for your work on this issue, Senator.
Thank you, Jeff. Stacy Seltzer?
Hi, thank you so much for having me tonight. I am just a parent who lives in Oceanside with a middle schooler who was cyberbullied, and everywhere I turned, I hit a brick wall. So I reached out to your office, and here I am.
Okay, well, your perspective is very important today. We appreciate this. Sarah Dowler?
Hi, my name's Sarah Dowler. I'm a high school health teacher in Oceanside for 20 years now. I'm also the chair of our school district drug advisory and wellness council. I'm a co-founder and chair of Oceanside Safe. And I'm glad to be here as well. And I feel like I could bring the voice of the kids. They're very open and honest. And it's a very different experience with it in high school than it is at the younger level. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Lisa Michelle?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the honor to serve on this panel today. As the target of cyberstalking and harassment, I felt the horror and devastation of what many of our youth experience when faced with cyberbullying. the shame, the fear, the anxiety, the helplessness. During the height of the harassment, I realized how overwhelming similar experiences were for youth. And over time, I learned where New York had been falling short. And I also learned how to navigate systems, access the support I needed, and diminish its future impact. I currently serve on the executive board of I Can Help. I'm an adjunct professor at Long Island University's Riverhead campus, and I speak at universities, schools, faith-based organizations, and community organizations to help diminish cyberbullying.
Thanks so much. Joe Salamone.
Thank you, Senator. Joe Salamone, founder and executive director of the Long Island Coalition Against Bullying. We're a nonprofit on the island focused on answering 3 questions. How do you find kids who are being bullied? How do you help them? And how do you prevent future instances of it from happening?
Thank you, Joe. David Kilnick, nice to see you again.
Sure, good to see you too, Senator. David Kilnick, President and CEO of the LGBT Network, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Network. We're an association of several nonprofit organizations that serve Long Island and Queens LGBT communities and families throughout the lifespan. But the largest organization of our network is Long Island Gay and Lesbian Youth, or Legally. And that organization has been around for 28 years now. And we provide a whole bunch of different services, but one of those is a really large anti-bullying program in over 117 Long Island school districts. And glad to be here today because cyberbullying of LGBT youth is 3 times higher than other students' experiences, and look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Officer Kingba. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Officer Kingba, Nassau County Police Department. My full name is Ade Kunle Kingba, by the way. Thank you for having me, Senator.
Thanks so much for being here. Katie Schumacher from Don't Press Send.
Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Schumacher. I am the founder and author. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay. You can hear me, right? Okay. My name is Katie Schumacher. I am the founder and author of the Don't Press Send campaign, which started about 6 years ago. And I go in and present to schools starting from 2nd grade all the way through college. My program called An Education in Cyber Civics, in which we teach children how to conduct themselves online, and most importantly, empathy behind the screen.
Thank you. And for those of us who are joining us on Facebook Live, we're just introducing our expert panel. There hasn't been a lot of substance discussed yet. You haven't missed anything. And I'd like to introduce Solomon, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Solomon Akazi, and I'm a sophomore attending Valley Stream Central High School. I'm the president and founder of SCSJ, that is Students Committed to Social Justice. SCSJ is a 7 through 12 club in which students can come and discuss topics surrounding social justice that directly and uniquely affect the world that we live in. SCSJ is a safe space where students can come and share their experiences with things such as racially targeted aggression, xenophobia, and ignorance of all types, both online and in real life. In addition to discussing ways and methods we can work together to combat these things in our communities and schools.
Well, we are certainly really glad you're here, Solomon. Thank you so much. Ashley?
My name is Ashley Ganesh. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a senior at Baldwin High School, and I'm also an ambassador in the Northwell Health Cohen's Anti-Bullying Ambassador Program. So I'm working with my peers and my advisors at Northwell to create a campaign in my school that really raises awareness about the dangers of cyberbullying, especially on social media platforms, and also raise awareness about the mental health issues that stem from cyberbullying. So thank you again for having me.
Thanks so much. Jim Pettinato?
Thank you, Senator. I'm Jim Pettinato. I'm a lieutenant with the Nassau County Police Department. I'm the Deputy Commanding Officer of Community Affairs. The unit here, I work with Officer Kingba. We do a lot of trainings in schools. We have some youth programs, and we're always looking for community outreach and engagement. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. And finally, Eric Post from the American Jewish Committee.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Eric Post. I'm the Regional Director of the AJC Long Island. The American Jewish Committee was founded in 1904 to protect the Jewish community and to provide democratic values for all. Our interest in being here today is that we started something called the Community of Conscience, which is 17 organizations across Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk County that bring together pretty much every minority group, the LGBTQ community, the community of advocates for disability rights to combat hate. So we have particular legislative interest in this bill, and we will, following this hearing, we'll work with Senator Kaminsky's team to see how we can promote the bill in Albany and ultimately get it passed.
Thank you. So, I just want to let all our awesome panelists tonight know that we have a very big group. We particularly wanted to have this be as expansive as possible, but that also means I'm just going to ask everyone to try to be as concise as possible so everybody can contribute. I want to start with Dr. Scott Poland and just ask him to take just a few minutes on what's happening around our country. What is this phenomenon that is cyberbullying? How is it manifesting itself? Who's being impacted? And what are we seeing around the country?
Well, Senator, unfortunately, suicide is now the second leading cause of death for children over the age of 10. And I believe strongly that we need to recognize many children are being bullied both online and both at school. And of course, during this pandemic, we've had technology as like a lifeline so that they don't feel so isolated from peers. But, just the other day, a parent said, I wanted to check out what my son was doing on his phone. He wouldn't give me the password. I think parents need to be reminded that technology is a privilege and not a right. And I believe strongly, given the scope of suicidal thinking, especially for high school students and the dramatic increase in suicidal behavior for middle schoolers, and many school counselors are talking to me about elementary age children that are threatening suicide. When we know kids are involved in bullying, we should not hesitate to ask them questions about hopelessness, thoughts of giving up, and thoughts of suicide. And it's really important that we support the victims of bullying and that we provide consequences for the bully. And the consequences need to escalate if the bullying continues. And school staff should not keep bullying behavior a secret. It's like everybody will be watching you. And then sometimes parents think the answer is to confront the bully's parents or confront the actual bully. And that doesn't work. It's work with the school and local authorities and assure your child we're going to get this stopped. Perhaps the saddest thing is kids say, when it happens so many times, I started to think I deserve to be treated that way. No kid deserves to be the victim of bullying. And the cyberbullying's anonymity, I think, lends itself to even meaner and nastier things than kids would actually say in person. And school personnel will basically say, oh, it was only one thing posted on the internet. That doesn't meet the definition of being repetitive. But wait a minute, 42 kids supported and maybe even added to the nastiness of that message. And I'm a big fan of an app called Rethink, developed by an adolescent. And if it's on a kid's phone, it's on their laptop, it recognizes hurtful words, and they basically get a message about, could you rethink this? And I think that is a critical app for all adults to know about.
Thank you so much. And by the way, I'm going to do my best to curate this and call on people who I think might have something to add, but you all might. So you could hit the raise hand function or literally raise your hand, and I will get you next. Can Sue, I want to go to Sue and then to Stacy about what they're seeing in their experiences in their particular roles.
Yeah, well, I think right now, some of the bullying that we're seeing online has shifted a little bit in its nature since COVID. There's a lot more exclusion bullying versus outright bullying. I think kids being stuck home now and isolated from their peers, a lot of our counseling is, depending on what family's comfort level is with letting their kids go to other people's houses or go hang out and see other kids, that now they're being left off of group chats. They're being left off of when they're going to meet up. If their family's not comfortable with letting their children, like my children, don't leave the house, they don't go on play dates anymore. They're being excluded from that end. So it's the fear of missing out, or, now being left out of the, the friends group chats. That's a whole different part of bullying that we didn't have necessarily before. It's not as much as the outward stuff. It's more of the exclusion stuff that I'm seeing on the rise. In addition to all of the other stuff that was always there before. I feel like that has really increased since last March.
Okay, thank you. Stacy, can you, I know it's been quite an ordeal, and you could probably speak at length about it. But in the light of the time constraints we have, tell us what you experienced and what it was like, please.
What happened was we found out that my daughter's images from her private TikTok account were being used, and somebody made a new TikTok account in her name with her screenshots of her videos, and they put it to sexually explicit music. So she's 13. We called the police, and she was with us, and she's adorable, and the police wanted to help, but there was nothing to do. They said they'd file a report. The report has a number. There's no information in it. There's nothing about it. They suggested calling the school. I did call the school. My principal's amazing, and she worked with us, and we got through it, and it did end, but her hands are tied too. And I felt like everywhere I went, TikTok makes it very hard to get in touch with them. Instagram makes it very hard to get in touch with them. I sent emails to Instagram, and they told me that they couldn't give me access to the account because my credentials don't match the credentials on the account. I explained that my daughter was a minor and her own private pictures were being used to sexually explicit music by another person, and their platform was being used for cyberbullying, and they never responded. I private messaged on Twitter the CEO of TikTok, no response. There's just no way to get anyone. So no one's held responsible.
Got it. So that's an important note for me to understand about the ability to contact social media platforms and the inability to do that. So we're going to go from Ashley to Katie. Ashley, what are you seeing in Baldwin? What cyberbullying have you seen? What troubles you the most? What's going on out there?
Well, recently throughout high school, you really don't see physical bullying anymore. That's been a really apparent change from elementary school to high school. It's all online now, especially on TikTok. Personally, in regards to TikTok, it's more with people that I'm not familiar with, but in regards to people from my school, I've seen Instagram accounts that are like the Tea at Baldwin or like the Baldwin Shade Room. It's those kinds of names, and they're used to get anonymous tips from people who attend the school or people who even are just random strangers. They can say anything they want. They can make up lies. They can spread rumors, and everything's anonymous. That's the point of the website. And then they take that information and they post it on Instagram. People repost it, and the problem is we don't know who makes those accounts. We don't know if they even go to our school. We don't know who provides the rumors. And on TikTok, it's the same anonymity. It gets complicated because you see it in the comment section, you see it in your DMs, it's everywhere on the platform. And there really is no accountability on these platforms because, as Stacey said, they make it so hard to contact the owners of the platforms, and teachers and guidance counselors are really they can't really do anything because they aren't a part of the platforms. They aren't necessarily part of what's going on online, and if they're not part of it, if they don't know where the source is, there's no accountability there. So that's a major problem I'm seeing.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. We're going to do Katie, Solomon, and Sarah.
Well, Todd, I think we need to have a whole nother parent presentation. We did it a few years ago, but I think it's time for another one. Everything that everyone is bringing up is what I address because there are so many layers to this. But in general, I'm writing notes as everybody's talking, and the exclusion is extremely painful. Parents need to know that we just had a high school student explain TikTok, private account. There's no such thing as private. It does not exist. Parents are not educated enough to allow what should be allowed and what shouldn't be. It's a four-prong approach. The tech companies have no accountability. And if you try to contact them, they're all farmed out of the United States. So there's a problem. So again, our children are on devices they are not mature enough for, and we have a severe mental health crisis at our hands because of it. Our children's social and emotional development is greatly at risk, and it's getting lower and lower and lower. I started this 7 years ago, and now I'm talking to seven-year-olds who are on Snapchat and Instagram. So again, like the first gentleman was saying, parents need to set guidelines. And then on the other side, the school has to teach, and the school is being held accountable for what happened at Saturday on your house on your device. So it is very complicated. So the reality is these devices should not be in their hands, and there needs to be age appropriate apps, things that when you buy a cell phone, the first thing they should ask is, how old is this child? Okay, well then these settings are on it automatically. You can't get it. If I buy a toy at Fisher Price, I know it's age appropriate. The buttons aren't going to fall off and my 3-year-old's not going to choke on it. There has to be some accountability to these tech companies, because this is like, the tobacco companies. They're cashing in on our children's well-being. And we have to take a stand.
Thanks so much, Katie. We're going to go Solomon, Sarah, and then to Jeff Reynolds.
Right. I believe that the targeting and harassment of minority youth is often underrepresented in discussions about cyberbullying and the like. Millions of children are terrorized daily on the simple fact that they're part of marginalized groups in the United States, this being further exacerbated and highlighted in the modern age of technology due to easy access through social media and direct messaging. Kind of like what Ashley said and others, all this bullying is now done through social media, like TikTok and Instagram pages, and the anonymous nature of these platforms really just enables this behavior and prevents any real consequences from administration and the like. Like other people have said, contact with these companies is almost completely fruitless. Like there's no real response, or it's just like an automated message. And the creating of these accounts cannot be traced back to these people most of the time because of, like people said, lack of credentials, lack of access, and it's really just becoming a big problem, especially now.
Thanks so much, Solomon. Sarah, Jeff Reynolds, and Laura Campbell, please.
Okay, we start in school cyberbullying education at our youngest grades right now. And really everything everyone's saying, I completely agree with. If I were to, my own experience, have like 3 takeaways that I could kind of share is, one, again, this is being reinforced, but parents need to educate themselves and talk to their kids on a regular basis. That it's really just not happening. The second, parents need to monitor what their kids doing. And it's tricky because a lot of these apps, they disappear. They send something and they're gone. So they need to really educate themselves with how these apps work. And then I would love to see, I know Katie just said something about the pre-settings for age. I would love to change the norm and see kids not on social media at such a young age. And I see, again, elementary kids have their own TikTok accounts, just like you said. And maybe that would be a great idea to have settings age appropriate, where they could only get to certain apps and certain settings based on their age. I don't know. That was a good idea, Katie.
Thanks, Sarah. Jeff Reynolds, Laura, and then we'll kick it over to Joe.
So just to build on Sarah's point, I would actually go an extra step and say parents should be modeling good behavior when it comes to social media. Very often parents are spending their entire dinner time and half their lives on social media, including TikTok. And then to say to their kids, you shouldn't be on social media so much. Well, kids watch what we do rather than
or putting them in videos a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So not only are there security concerns, but you need to kind of model the appropriate behavior. I mentioned at the outset that we run a children's mental health program, and Todd, you and I have spoken throughout COVID about the impact of COVID on kids' mental health. The anxiety, the depression that extends not only from those kids, but to their families as well, has been very, very significant. And the uptick in hospitalizations for kids has been very significant. Attempted suicides, completed suicides. This compounds that and makes it infinitely worse. We almost believe that by giving kids that outlet to express themselves and connect with other people, we're helping them deal with some of that anxiety. It's not. We look at kids and we look at them before and after they use social media for an extended period of time, the anxiety levels go up. I would make a case, and it's probably going to be one of your final closing points, is that the best thing we could do for us and our kids is to take these things and put them down for a little while, take our kids away from that kind of stuff, get them outside, take a back to basics approach to family and to technology.
Thank you, Jeff. Laura?
I mean, I agree with what everybody is saying here, every bit of it. I think there's a parenting gap. Parents don't have the understanding. They didn't grow up this way. I think if parents knew what some of this could lead to down the road, I think they might view it differently. I think we have to teach, just like we teach with addiction of anything else. We have to teach that with social media and with what they're doing. The comparison gaps, when they start comparing themselves and then being bullied, and, how somebody handles life prior to a crisis is an indication of how they handle life during a crisis. We know that anxiety was on the rise way before COVID came around. And this just compounded everything that we were already seeing: rising anxiety, depression, suicide. And this is just compounding it because now everybody's more on screens. I agree 100% with the modeling piece. Parents are a number one influencer for their youth. That's something they need to realize, that this is a world where they need leadership. And we have to show them that.
Thank you, Laura. Before I get to you, I just want to take a quick survey from Sue to Solomon to Ashley. Is there any cyberbullying or any type of social media education that happens in Lynbrook, Valley Stream, Central, or Baldwin at any age? Do you know if there's any component of whether it's in the auditorium for a lecture, whether it's in a classroom or part of health class, or any kids? Does the school have anything that they're saying?
Yeah, well, at Lynbrook, definitely. So I'm not in the elementary or middle, but I believe it is happening there. And then at the high school, yes, we do address it with our kids, and we do have speakers come in. And I know in health class, we do address some of that. I think, again, as someone said before, 7-year-olds on social media. I mean, my son's 8. He's not on social media. I couldn't even imagine. So I think, yeah, from a younger age, I think really it needs to be addressed.
Okay. Solomon, Ashley, has anyone ever talked to you in an official capacity about this?
Honestly, not really in depth. They touch on it in our health classes a little bit. I'm a sophomore now, and as far as I know in the curriculum, that's pretty much the only year. So like in 7th grade and in 10th grade now, there's like a mini unit on social media, but it's a little bit out of date, to be honest, because like people were mentioning, this is a whole new world. Kids are being raised with these devices in their hands, and they're not being taught how to rectify that, and I think that we need to do more work in curriculum teaching children the gravity of the situation, because it is almost becoming a pandemic, like an epidemic of anxiety and such.
Thanks. Ashley?
I definitely agree with Solomon. The curriculum needs to be reformed in a way, because not only is it out of date, but kids keep hearing the same conversation: don't be a bully, be nice to others. And those are obviously very important messages. But the issue is kids are almost numb to that now. And it's a result of a variety of components. But teachers and guidance counselors need to change the way they talk to students about bullying and cyberbullying, because kids just aren't listening anymore. And it's very sad, because partially it's because they're numb, partially it's because they just don't care. And my school, it's up to the students now. We have a student leadership group, and we're taking initiative to have an anti-bullying campaign, and we're trying to change the way that it's spoken among children. I think when it's facilitated by an adult, it comes off in a different way, and that's why kids are less likely to abide by what they're told. But I think peer-to-peer conversation is the key to changing the way that kids act online. So I think our curriculum should encourage that more, peer-to-peer conversation.
Very smart. Thank you, Mayor. So we're going to go to Joe, David, and then ADA Tevin.
I kind of hate to kind of compound the whole concept of parenting, but it really, to Jeff's point about leadership, you can go into any one of these Facebook groups that the parents and the moms and dads have, and really, you don't have to look very far to the way that they mistreat each other. So it really shouldn't come as that much of a surprise why we see kids doing it to one another, because look at the example. Their pictures are there, their names are there, and it does not deter the kind of vicious behavior that gets seen. And I think it goes back to something that can't really be legislated. You cannot legislate empathy. That is something that needs to be taught. Screens don't have empathy. Telling somebody something over a screen does not have the same impact it does, nor would anybody say half of the things they say on a screen to somebody face to face. And I think that is really something that needs to be pushed more, is the empathy piece of it.
Sure. I want to thank you, Joe. I want to pick up on what Joe just said, because we could tell parents not to pick up their phones and put them down and be with their children, but if we don't change the culture of what's out there, of what we're not going to make many changes, particularly for LGBT LGBTQ youth. And so, I just want to throw a few statistics out there, but then, there's people behind these statistics, right? And so I just want to share, and I'll be quick, to tell a story. So, sadly, LGBT youth are the target of discrimination in school and online. Now, 35%, and we were part of this study just last year, 35% have received threats online. 58% say something bad is said to them or about them online. 33% report sexual harassment online. 20% report receiving harassing text messages from other students. Now, these numbers for LGBTQ youth are 3 to 4 times higher than other students' experiences. And for many LGBT youth, they are using the internet to develop community or to find other people where they could just be themselves. And particularly this past year during the pandemic, to find that community has, our community centers are not open yet, has been online. And so whether it's the discrimination they face or, similar situations to what Stacy shared, where screenshots are taken and then people are outed without their consent, which leads to a lot of harassment and abuse, it leads to great mental health impact on our LGBTQ youth. So, we have to do more than just say, don't do it, obviously, and we are here. Even such things as, and I know Senator Kaminsky, you're a co-sponsor on this bill that we're working on in Albany called Teach LGBTNY. And this is so that LGBTQ history is mandated to be taught in all of our schools. That is really important for a community that is largely invisible. I mean, the youth who are here on the panel and the youth who, a lot of the youth student leaders that we work with are incredibly resilient and strong, and their voices need to be heard and to be lifted. But we need to address the systemic issues behind cyberbullying as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks, David. It looks like it's nice and warm wherever you are, so good luck. ADA Tevitt?
It's so important for us to keep having these conversations, because the more times you hear the message from different perspectives, the more you have the ability to have it hit home with somebody who's in the audience, right? So when we go into schools and we do our Stop and Send internet safety presentation as young as kindergarten, and our prosecutors address kindergarten through high school, in the age appropriate versions, but the kindergartners know Snapchat and TikTok. The icon comes up on the screen and they all shout it out. They all say they have access to a phone. We do the presentation for parents. They have no idea what the apps are that their kids are using or what security features might be able to be enabled to protect some of their information, and who can have access to those photos that they then use to create a fake account in someone else's name. So we talk about that. That education is key to some of this, that we're all experiencing. And I think Ashley brings up a good point of that peer-to-peer conversations. The more that we can facilitate that, you have to realize there's another person on the end of that screen, right? And their feelings are impacted, their life is impacted. And that's the piece that we're missing, especially now when everybody's on their screen and on their phone all of the time due to COVID.
AD Tempe, can you give us a minute of what you're looking for when a parent comes to you and says, I think a crime has been committed?
We hope that maybe there's a screenshot or, a text message or an email or something of what they saw online. The problem with some of these apps, for example, Snapchat, if you don't catch it right in that moment, it looks like it disappears. But we're looking to see, is there any information that helps us identify who's doing it? Sometimes they are quote unquote anonymous because it's an actual stranger. But a lot of times, especially with the younger kids, it's somebody that they suspect, right? It's somebody that they know, a kid they've had an issue with. That used to be their best friend, and now they've had a falling out. This is the kid who was always picking on them in school. So it can kind of give us a lead. We talk to the school because they may be dealing with this, right? They may have already had these kids in the guidance counselor's office because there have been ongoing issues, and now it's just moved onto this platform. So we have to figure out, one, who's the perpetrator, B, what did they do? Do we have any evidence of that? And that can be hard to get sometimes because these companies may or may not be responsive to a subpoena to try and get subscriber or, the information of the person who created that account. So sometimes an arrest and a prosecution isn't going to solve all of the problems. Even when we can make an arrest and go forward with a prosecution, we need to do more than that, right? We need to work on prevention. We need to work on education to stop it from even happening in the first place.
Thanks so much, ADA Tebbit. Eric and then Lisa, please.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. What I'm thinking about here as I hear people speak, I'm not an expert in cyberbullying, but I do come from the world of combating hate, combating anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. And the group we've put together to really do that on a state level for legislation like this. And I was thinking about when someone was talking about mimicking parents, children mimicking their parents, and we find ourselves in such a divisive and polarized time when Asian Americans are being targeted, in COVID, being blamed for the coronavirus or anti-Semitism conspiracy theories during the coronavirus. There's just so much discrimination and hate that's boiling up in our country, and part of that comes down to children, unfortunately. And I don't know the exact statistic, but I would imagine it was a fair amount. And some of the experts on this call could let us know that some of the discrimination that's happening is based on race, religion, ethnicity, and that's why we're interested, particularly in this bill, and that's why we're supporting it.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And then if either or both members of the police department would like to add something.
Thank you. So, hearing everybody's thoughts and insights, it's really very meaningful to me that we're all gathered here today. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. And thank you again, Senator Kaminsky, for pulling us all together, because these are the representation of the voices that we need to hear. So this is great. I was surprised when I started to do the trainings that the most popular training that I did was cyberbullying prevention for parents. Because I was coming from a different place. And then I quickly learned that the parents didn't know, about social media platforms, and they were mostly interested, ADA Tebbit, in documentation, how to document, what's the best way to document, how to store the documents. And, since my story went public, I get calls and emails and people reach out to me from all different places. And that's something that we go through. And what's the best way to document? But I want to touch on what Ashley was saying about the peer-to-peer communication, because I believe that is going to be one of our best ways to achieve success and diminish cyberbullying with all ages. Whether we can use a model of I Can Help, or in the UK, we can learn best practices from anti-bullying pro ambassadors, where, New York State, we can lead in so many ways. We can do an amazing job at this, right? We can have, anti-bullying, anti-cyberbullying, cyberbullying prevention ambassadors in every school, in every community, and really make a difference.
I appreciate that. Would any member of the police department like to add something?
Sure, Officer Kingba, once again, we all make great points. I do agree with everyone, but the tech companies and the big Instagram, Facebook do need to take accountability. But as you know, when you open up these accounts, you kind of click a box that gives them the right to use the footage and to pretty much state that you of age when you click the box. I understand it's really hard with these tech companies because a lot of them are based overseas, but for the police department, the first thing we do is take all accounts seriously, and we document it. Our key to us is take documentation as quick as possible and as often as possible, and then it goes up the chain to the other officers that deal with it. But it's not an easy ongoing, it's not an easy thing to deal with at the moment, as you can see. And another point I have to make, parents do have to be accountable for what their children are exposed to. They're very vigilant. They're very aware of what's going on. And social media is something they know what's going on because it's talked about every day in school. And it's like, if they're not in it, they kind of get bullied just for not being on social media because they feel like they're missing out. But parents have to take a big part in it, and as well as the school. But parents start at home first.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask a couple questions and then go back to Dr. Poland. So let me first ask in this order, Jeff Reynolds, Katie, and Sarah. let's say you're the parent of a fifth grader. What should the world look like for you? Does it mean your kid normally would have a phone in case you want to reach him or her, but you don't have them on social media, or you do, but you monitor it, or you're constantly talking to them about it? What is the model for how you should go forward as a middle school parent, or as somebody who you think you might still be able to influence the right way to be able to have better outcomes?
Yeah, great question, Todd. And I'll take, a stab at a couple pieces of this. I think in large part, it depends on the child. There are very mature fifth graders, and then there are less than mature fifth graders. And so, you kind of look and see where there's been demonstrated responsibility. I think children and families should have a good reason for a child having a phone. It shouldn't just necessarily be to access social media. And I think some of that is dialed up and dialed back depending upon that child's behavior. I would say, and as you know, I do a lot of education around substance use prevention, and the notion that our children should have any shred of privacy is crazy. It's ridiculous. It shouldn't even be part of the conversation. And so there should be an open phone policy, and there's enough technology out there to keep an eye on what our kids are doing, but parents need to learn about it. Parents need to monitor it. Parents need to say to their kids, look, there's going to come a point in time, maybe even every day, where I say to you, hand me your phone. I want to take a look at it. And so what I'd say is it's a back and forth about whether or not it's appropriate. And if you do give that privilege, it's something that should be monitored very assertively. And once you go down the road of some of these social media platforms and you give your kids Snapchat or something else, it's very hard to dial that back. So think long and hard before you do it.
Well, while we're here, let me just throw this out. Does anyone have, for any parents watching, does anyone have the names or any, and you could just feel free to chime in, names of any of these apps or helpful technological devices that could help them monitor and or limit problematic social media interactions? Katie?
Disney Circle has a great, I don't know what you'd call it, technology thing. What happens is you can connect every single device in your entire home, including yours, your children's cell phones, Xbox, any single device, and you can decide when it's shut off. So that means if you want all cell phones off at 8 o'clock or all devices off at 8, 9 o'clock, they can't get on. So we all know they're addictive. And I'm going back to your other question, is if we could now, because we've had the poor guinea pigs for the last 15 years, and we've seen what happened when you give kids no rules and you say, here you go. We now have to take what we've learned from that time. And if you're giving a fifth grader, like you had said, my personal opinion is no elementary student needs any kind of social media. If you feel they need a phone in elementary school because you're coming home and you want to have contact or whatever, you can get a burner phone. A burner phone has your numbers and the few numbers that are on it. That's what needs to happen. When they are ready, let's say the onset of middle school, which is not a good age to give someone social media. It is a really hard time in development. So that it needs to be pushed back. But let's say you wanted to start 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, whatever your family decides, you start with one app. And just like Jeff was saying, you monitor it, you this, and I didn't see you wrote something that nice. It's my phone. We have to hold, only because our kids feel safe when they know what the rules are. Our kids' levels of anxiety are so high because there are no rules on social media. So we have to be the adults, we have to be the parents and set the rules.
Sarah?
I completely agree with what both of you said. And I have 3 children, one 6 and a 13 and a 16-year-old, and no phones in elementary school. And then middle school, you're exactly right. You one app at a time, one piece of social media when they're ready. And what Jeff said, all kids are ready at different ages. And they have to prove themselves. Even with my own kids who are great kids, there are times no, you're done with social media for a month. You're done, and you have to take the littlest deal and make it the biggest deal, so they know what is appropriate and what's not. So I completely agree with both of you in the guidelines that you think are appropriate. I do as well.
Dr. Poland, and then we'll get to Sue. Is there any data or anything you've seen about what's been working around the country at stemming the tide and what has proven effective, whether it's in a few households or in a larger sample?
Well, honestly, no. I can give you some individual examples, and I agree also with the many things that have been said, but it's difficult to reach parents to get them to actually turn out for a presentation sponsored by schools. And here locally, before the pandemic, I couldn't believe it, but 2,200 parents showed up to hear about raising a child in these challenging times. But that school has a waiting list. And if your kid's accepted, you have to do continuing education. So that's how they got them there. And I'm always asking when I'm asked to do parent talks, what's the incentive? How can we convince kids to encourage their parents to attend? And having done this for decades, usually the parents that do come are doing a pretty good job. But I think at an early level, schools have a responsibility to convey the kind of information we've heard today and to talk with parents about what is developmentally appropriate. Get the OIT department, because they know all the latest technology and the pitfalls and the dangers. This needs to be in newsletters or a few minutes at any presentation where somebody like a school counselor is talking about some of the latest issues. And the other question is, of course, a kid being cyberbullied, why don't they tell an adult? And the answer usually is they're afraid, first of all, their parents will immediately take away all technology. But secondly, they don't think it's going to get stopped. Usually along the way, they did say something to an adult and not much happened. So as a result, then they just like, well, the adults can't help. But I'll just go back to so many things have been said about the parents taking charge of the technology. And I totally agree with the idea that they don't need to be having a social media presence till at least middle school. And the other day, the parent was describing they basically got in a battle with their kid because they wouldn't give the passcode so the parent could access the phone. And the bottom line is the parent paid for the phone. The parent's paying for the Verizon or whatever the service is. So sometimes I like to just say to parents, stand up now, repeat after me, you are the parent. Your happiness cannot depend on whether or not your 10-year-old likes you at this moment. But so many parents they've simply lost track of so many things, or they're overwhelmed with what's going on in their life. And the kids are largely on their own, which is something several of you have mentioned. And obviously I'm really concerned about the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender questioning young people, because they definitely are targets. And we have a diverse country. Try starting a gay straight alliance in the middle of Kansas, where I'm from, and it's like good luck. But in suburban and urban areas, of course, administrators are more supportive of those organizations to help kids feel safe. And by the way, nobody can learn when they're afraid or when somebody has just posted something horrific about them. Whatever that lesson is, it doesn't even matter at this moment, because they can only think about what was just posted. And some kids even wake up in the middle of the night to check their technology. And the parents should simply say, they should use all these settings that are right here on my Apple phone for the downtime, the time the phone's off, the apps that are approved, the apps that aren't. But parents are simply not educated and not motivated to take charge of all of this.
Thank you, Doctor. Sue, Solomon, and David.
Yep. And I was actually just going to piggyback on what Katie and Sarah said, but then Dr. Poland said a lot of what I was going to say. But, I think getting the parents on board is the biggest piece to this. And especially now during the pandemic, I would say kids at a younger age, whereas my son only has an iPod, doesn't have a phone. But now during the pandemic, he's home when he was home during the day. I'm working. He has access to it now, so I'm less monitoring. Parents are working, and the kids have more access to it, especially the younger kids. The older kids have it all day, but the younger kids typically only had it when they were home, and now they're home a lot. So, and the parents are working themselves, and they're not able to monitor as well. So to get parents on board and to, the wait till 8 movement, has shifted down. And even to me, 8th grade is still very early to have access to social media. But it's getting the buy-in. And for those of us who are parents, we know that once that first person gets something, I mean, my son only got an iPod because for 2 years his friends was at it and he was begging, and he doesn't have passwords to any of it. But, you know, it's really hard to toe the line when, you know, the parents are not really on board. And I struggle with that as a parent and as a guidance counselor. So it's definitely, I think, more education and outreach to that contingency needs to happen.
Thanks, Sue. Solomon, David?
Right. I'm hearing just a lot of good things, and I'm really excited because I know I had access to technology at a very young age, and that has affected me till now. But I do want to raise this point that technology is not going away, and like the assertion that you can just completely cut your kids off from it is kind of ridiculous and honestly not realistic. Because I'm just speaking from my experience as a student and as a kid. Kids will find a way to get technology either way. And I really think I just want to echo the point of education. Like you need to educate your kids in the gravity of the situation, how much it can actually affect them. Because sometimes kids don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's your job as a parent and as a part of the administration to emphasize that, because I would compare it kind of to health education, like sex ed. Kids are going to be sexually active. We can't stop that, but what we can do is educate you and prepare you for the possibility that you might do this. And I think to just cut kids off in this world that's constantly moving forward, because this is a changing world. And I'm understanding now that in recent years, technology has just ramped up so rapidly and it's hard to keep up, especially as people who didn't grow up with technology. But now we're in a world where kids need technology and they need it to go out into the workplace and go out into this new world. So we can't just cut them off from it completely. I think that would be a disservice to your kids to just completely cut them off from social media. I think you need to educate yourself and the kids on what to stay away from. I use the settings to cut them off from certain things, but this cold turkey policy, I truly feel is not realistic, because kids will go out and use their friend's phone, or they'll go out and use a phone here. Like you'll be surprised how creative kids are in getting access to things that you tell them not to use. So yeah, this policy of education and educating parents and kids is really important, I feel.
Thanks. David, Ashley, and Laura, please.
Sure. Great comment, Solomon, because I think that, I think one of the things we have to remember is that not every kid comes from a supportive family too, right? So for many LGBTQ youth, to say that parents should just take their phones and say, show me what's on your phone, could put them in great danger, right? Because their parents may not be supportive. When we talk about the relation to suicide too, LGBT youth are 2 to 3 times more likely to commit suicide to begin with. If they get rejected by their family, they're 8 times more likely to commit suicide. So I think, when we got to really understand that, and I think like Solomon said, technology's out there, right? Let's get down to addressing the roots of the problem. Addressing the culture, addressing the biases, addressing the violence, the power, all this other stuff that's part of it. But I would caution everyone greatly that not everyone comes from a supportive parent. And by saying that parents should just either cut off their technology, which may be the only source of safety and communication for someone online, to taking their phone away and unintentionally outing them in an unsafe environment puts them at greater danger. So let's do the harder work that we need to do and not come at this from a punitive perspective. Punitive perspective never solves anything. What we have to do is do the hard work and do the education, whether it's peer-to-peer or whether it's the organizations that are on here getting into the schools, and do what we need to do so that, all of our kids are safe. So I would just caution again, to, because unfortunately, I know from the work that I do, that there are way too many kids. One is way too many, but there's a hell of a lot more who are not coming from supportive homes.
Thanks. Ashley, then Laura, please.
I agree with everything that has been said thus far, but also to add, I think we should look at why kids are going on social media platforms in the first place. And a new thing is, they have this idea in their head that they can be TikTok famous, that they could be an influencer on Instagram on these platforms. And especially the younger they are, they tend to post more things that they shouldn't post, but they're so young, they don't even realize that they shouldn't post it. And so when you have this fantasy of becoming an influencer at a young age, it really becomes important that the parents are educated about what these platforms are and what they're posting. I think it's so important because I see so many 10-year-olds posting things they should not be posting on TikTok. And with the algorithm, that can be shown to anyone. Like I think someone mentioned before, private accounts are not private at all. And there's some very scary people on social media. So beyond just cyberbullying, I think it's very important that parents really see what their kids are posting. But also to piggyback on what Solomon said, kids are smart. Kids are smarter than their parents in this specific discipline. And although Apple phones, I know Apple phones have the settings where you can set time limits on apps. Kids know how to undo that. I do that. I undo it sometimes. And the problem is that I got my first phone at 11, so I was pretty young when I got my first phone. But my parents didn't start that conversation of, give me your passcode, I'm going to check your phone every single day or every week. I'm going to do this checkup with you to see what you're doing. They never started that when I first got my phone. And if they said to me, give me your phone right now, I'm going to check your text messages, I'd be like, no, because, although it sounds like it's not my place, now I'm 17, but my point is parents have to start that conversation as soon as the child gets the phone, or else that dialogue is never going to happen. And it's unrealistic to expect that your child will just give up their phone, although you are paying for it. From a child's perspective, it really is an invasion of their privacy, because as you grow with a phone, it just becomes more and more difficult to give it up. And one more thing to add, with the pandemic and everything going on, social media is kind of an escape in a way, especially TikTok for me. It really is an escape, as toxic as it is. So we need to recognize that kids need social media to sometimes just to survive, because sometimes that's just how they express themselves, or just find other people to share their stories with. So we need to recognize the good and the bad on social media first, and then educate ourselves as adults and as parents on how to protect our kids when they're participating in these activities.
Thanks, Ashley. We have Laura and Lisa, please.
So thank you, Solomon and Ashley, for being here and for giving us the insight that you do. Force brings resistance, and that's just physics, right? And that's what happens, and it creates more of this. There are apps and there are certainly monitoring techniques and devices out there, but let's not forget that nothing beats connection and conversation with our kids. Having that connection, building the communication and that relationship so that there's trust on both ends. Last week I spoke with two families where there was an 11 and a 12-year-old student who were engaging in online relationships with people, 15 and 18 years older than them. And, I don't know if Stacy would comment on this, but I don't know that parents know what can happen until it happens. So education and awareness and connection, I think, are really key.
Thanks, Lisa, and then I have a question for Stacy, please.
So Laura, you read my mind. I was going to say that education and communication are the foundation to making inroads here. One of the ways that parents can start the conversation, or it can happen in schools as well, is to use a digital citizen pledge, right? It looks like a contract. It's a physical tool to help have the conversation. It can be adapted for different ages. It addresses dangers, online dangers, not just cyberbullying, which is so important today. One of the things that I learned once I got involved in cyberbullying prevention, was so many really scary things that are happening online: luring, grooming, human trafficking. And we need to talk to our kids about that. At the same time, here, you're getting a new phone. Let's sit down and have a talk. So depending on the age, I'm not sure if I would give, I'm not sure we're giving the phone to an 8-year-old, but I'm not sure we're giving the 8-year-old the same contract as the 16-year-old. But those conversations need to happen. I know on the Nassau County Stop Bullying website, there is an example of a digital citizen pledge. There are others around, but they're very helpful as conversation starters, right? They shouldn't just be like, oh, here's a piece of paper, now let's go. And opening that line of communication, I'm pretty sure it's included, whether it's in that first version or a subsequent one, which says, if you see something online that's scary, that you shouldn't be seeing, come talk to me. It's okay. We need to have a conversation about it, because that communication is going to be key.
Thanks, Lisa. Stacy, I have a two-part question for you. The first is, what is your reaction to a lot of what you heard today? And then the second part is, going back to your ordeal, if you could be the president or the governor and just have put a law into place to help you with your situation, what would it have been?
So as far as everything I'm hearing, it's all great, but here's the bottom line. I'm on this Zoom with you guys and my kids are on their devices so that they don't interrupt me. So, it comes in handy sometimes. I am very lucky. I am on their devices all the time. I have access to everything. My middle schooler tells me everything. Everything. I may not have the same luck with my younger one when he gets to that point, but she does give me a lot of information. Sometimes I don't need to know all of it, but she does tell me a lot. And again, I have full access to it. As far as if I was the president and I can control this, I want there to be accountability. I want the people who do this to other people. It was 3:00 in the morning when the police came to my house. So we sat up and waited for them. I want the police to knock on these kids' doors and get them out of bed because they're accountable, have to be accountable for what they did to my kid.
ADA Tebbit, to kick that over to you, do you find, and this is a serious question, and I certainly don't want to undercut Stacy's experience here, and I was a prosecutor for 10 years, so accountability is what got me up in the morning every day. But is it a realistic model to think that the way that we're going to deal with cyberbullying is to show those bullies that you're not going to be able to do this? Does that work sometimes? Are there cases where you've seen punishment that had to be meted out and you were grateful it did? Where do you see the role coming in, and what are the barriers for you getting there if you do want to do that?
I think that's one piece of it. It certainly shouldn't be discounted. It's an important piece of it, but it can't be the only piece, right? And when we're talking about children of a very young age, and there are instances of cyberbullying between children at a very young age, a prosecution of a very young child is difficult. Obviously, my office doesn't handle that because we handle prosecutions of adults, but there are lots of challenges to those kinds of situations. So, we have to do more than that, right? Education, prevention, parents having these conversations, schools having these conversations. Another important piece that I think should be part of those conversations that we talk about is trying to have kids see the consequences of what they post, right? We talk about social media accounts for young people. We need to talk about the fact that they are creating the digital footprint that will follow them when they're adults. There's not a day that goes by that we don't see somebody in the news facing a consequence for something they posted on social media, whether it was something they posted a year ago or 10 years ago when they were younger. So trying to bring that message home to kids. It never goes away. So you might be posting something as a 13-year-old that the college you're applying to as a 17-year-old sees, and it might impact your admission into college, or that your potential employer sees, and it might affect your ability to get a job. And the examples go on and on and on. And I think that's another important piece that goes along with education and prevention. Somebody might use that information against you in any number of ways. And kids can't think that through, right? Because they don't think like adults. They don't see the consequences down the road. But we as adults, whether we're educators, parents, prosecutors, elected officials, community leaders, we can see that. And we have to try and bring that into the conversation as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know, Joe, I'm getting to you now, but, I know Katie has written and lectured extensively on that. What you put on social media never goes away. The title of her work is don't press send. And you hit that button, you don't get a chance to get it back anymore. And Teresa, you and I are kind of the same generation where, I am sure that we were lucky we got to go out at night and not have, unless you brought a little disposable camera with you, there was no, real memory other than what was in people's minds beyond any conduct you had. And look, I, for one, and by the way, I happen to, this is my view on body cameras, is I happen to think that if it makes people behave in a nicer way to each other and there's more accountability there's something good about knowing that your conduct might be, recorded. That being the case, though, you better be prepared for your conduct to be recorded. So,
right,
point is well taken.
We grew up in a different time. I'm glad I didn't go to high school in the era of social media, because I think that is very difficult for kids today. I have teenagers myself, and I see that. We title our presentation "Stop Then Send," very similar to the title of that other program, stop and think. How is this going to affect someone else? What impact is it going to have on me? Because the letters of the word stop, when you hit that P, pictures, posts, all those things last forever, right? So once you click send, post, share, forward, it's out of your hands. And we have to really remind kids of that.
Thank you. Joe?
I think the other point about communication and parenting is that, I've gotten asked a lot, why do I need to know this? My kids are fine. They have no issues. But you don't know when you're going to become the parent that all of a sudden has this to deal with. And I think I can't tell you how many parents I've spoken to.
Joe, as the bully, as the parent of the bullier or the victim, or both?
Both, really. And I think actually the aspect of the bully we haven't really focused on too much tonight, which is an important piece of it as well. But really both. Coming from the perspective of the person who's being victimized, my mom, I was bullied from 6th grade to senior year in high school every single day, relentlessly. She's still finding out today what happened then. And she was one of those parents who didn't think she had anything to worry about. And then all of a sudden she was the parent that had it all to worry about. I'm sure Stacy, when, before her situation happened, she didn't think that she was going to be that parent either. And then she was. So that's why the education piece is so important.
Okay, that's very helpful. Jeffrey, then David.
So two quick points, because I know we're running short on time, but one of them would be, we've got to better empower kids when they see something happening to intervene and to go to their parents. We spend a lot of time educating them about being a bystander in real life. We need to do more of that when it comes to the online world. And then secondly, I worry a lot about the lack of support services for kids who actually experience this. We've grown immeasurably in terms of supporting victims of other crimes, in terms of going through that process and getting through the trauma and getting that support. I think when it comes to images that disappear in the online world, we tend to chalk it up and say, well, it's a rite of passage these days and all kids go through it. I think for some kids, this is likely to provoke some trauma that can require some ongoing care. And so I would really make a pitch for services, not only to educate kids in terms of how to intervene, but also making sure that there are adequate support services available for kids who do fall victim to this.
All right, thanks. So we're going to then go to David, and then we're going to take some concluding remarks about any other ideas briefly that people might have for solutions that weren't discussed already. David?
I just want to put out there that we've heard a lot about in my feelings here of saying that our kids need to be adults too, right? And I think our adults need to be adults, right? And it's not just about taking away or looking at something. It's about what we do and our actions. So if you're supporting someone, and this is political, but I mean, if you're supporting someone who is supporting an insurrection or is supporting, bullying of other people, or, and with all due respect to our officers here, if you're part of you may not have any control on this, but, if you see the police unions come out and support someone like Donald Trump, which both counties did on Long Island, that's given a message saying that what that guy is saying in the White House about LGBT people, about Mexicans, about people of color, about Black Lives Matter is okay. And that adult behavior is being shown to their children, right? So I would just say that adults need to be adults too, and let our kids be kids. But we should be taking more responsibility, I think, as adults.
Okay, so we're just going to go to some people who are in our schools. We're going to go from Sarah to Sue to Solomon to Ashley, and just a very brief concluding remarks about where you think we need to go from here, please.
First of all, I want to repeat what Laura said. Ashley and Solomon, it's so great to have you two here. And I think what I've seen work the most are our peer education programs. We have a mentoring program where our seniors and our freshmen come together and talk about this topic. We have programs where our youth council will make presentations to health classes and our middle school. And I totally agree. When it comes to education of the youth, we need to listen to you and have you involved in the planning and the implementation of what we choose to do. So thank you for being here. And, it's so great to hear from you too.
Thanks, Sarah. Sue?
Yeah, I think that was a really good point about the follow-up, because I will say, so much is focused on getting the behavior to stop, to make sure whatever harassment or bullying going on online is happening. But you're right, the drop off is probably a lot of that after, that after counseling piece. Because unfortunately, when in-person bullying is going on, it's not on a stage to see. Online bullying, it's on display for everyone to see. So it's 10 times more traumatic for someone and kind of lives out there forever. So I think that's somewhere where the schools can probably do a little bit more focusing on. So that was a good point. I didn't think of that actually. So I think that that's something important to be a takeaway for this, that we can focus on supporting.
Thank you, Solomon and Ashley.
Okay. Again, just thank you for having us here. This is a great opportunity. I just want to echo what everyone else was saying, education and kind of what David was talking about. Parents need to take it upon themselves to educate themselves and want to go out there and be there for their children. Because now in this new age, oftentimes kids are educating their parents on how to use these things. And that, that wasn't the case a little while ago. And Stacy, your daughter telling you everything, I know sometimes like a little bit excessive, but that's really important, the open communication policy. And teens now, just speak to my experience, it's hard sometimes to talk about social media with your parents. And I think you need to foster an environment where kids can speak to your parents about things and speak to you about the things that they're going through. And I think that's really what's going to get us through this, is just open communication, education on both fronts. Again, thank you.
Ashley, thanks, Solomon. Ashley?
Thank you again so much for having me. And this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so glad conversations like this are being had. And just to echo Solomon, I mean, this open discussion needs to happen in schools too. Schools should not just be about learning English, math, social studies. They need to be educating our students about what they experience in day-to-day life. And there needs to be more of an emphasis placed on mental health, especially during this pandemic. It's gotten so hard for kids, so hard for teens to open up to their parents, open up to guidance counselors. I've never seen a guidance counselor to talk about my feelings. It's very hard for kids to go there, even no matter how many times they say it's a safe place. So I think overall, we need to place emphasis on these peer-to-peer conversations, place an emphasis on creating areas, times in schools where you can just talk to each other, talk to adults who like sit down in the conversation. Just make it more accessible to students and educate them about how to take care of themselves while they're on social media. There's no taking away social media. So I think that education aspect is very important all around. So.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Solomon and Ashley, for both being here. Dr. Scott Poland, some concluding remarks, and then we'll see if there are any final comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator. And, I think we could argue that the mental health needs of the children in America are at their greatest in history. And I think everything has to be developmental, with parents educated. Parents must be present in the lives of their children. They need to model appropriate behavior. And at the simplest level, families need a technology usage plan. Let's talk about it. Let's get the input from everybody. And I do know that the social media is really a lifeline to so many young people today. And obviously we can't take that away. But that doesn't mean we can't have conversations about how to post things that are more positive. And at the simplest level, we have to have go-to adults in every kid's life. Trusted adults at school, at home, in the community. And when they come to us, we need to respond with really listening. Too often we say, do this, do that, you won't have a problem. We really need to listen and help them work through and come up with some solutions to what they're facing. And I do believe strongly that whenever we know a kid is involved in bullying, whether they're the bully, whether they're the victim, we shouldn't hesitate at school with school counselors, asking them about thoughts of suicide. And parents should be comfortable asking those questions. And then we are able to help every kid know there's 24-hour crisis resources. You're not the first person to feel this way. There's help available. I'll be there for you every step of the way.
Dr. Poland, thanks for reminding us of the stakes here, because this isn't just, I want my kid to be a better person, or we need to be nice to each other. This could lead to catastrophic tragedy, and too often has. So this is a deadly serious subject, and thank you for taking the time. We have time for about one or two more last comments. Katie, and then if there's anyone else. Katie, Eric, and then we'll conclude. Thank you. Katie, you're on mute.
I just want to give a resource that one of the panelists was talking about, a pledge on the don'tpresssend.com website. There is a pledge which is exactly meant to start conversations in your home. I believe with what the last speaker was just talking about, that is really important that each and every school has someone specifically dealing with these social media issues, that there is a person in each and every school that children know where they can go, because our guidance counselors, our school social workers, our principals, they are overwhelmed with the amount of problems it's bringing to their schools. And because we have a reality of this mental health crisis right now, we need someone in each school giving them these tools. And one easy way of every school and every parent is to teach mindfulness. I have two great apps, which I highly recommend, Headspace and the Calm app. It's 10 minutes a day. Everyone has 10 minutes. The skills your children will get will teach them to be present, to be engaged in right here and right now, and learn to not have that FOMO. Learn to be present and engaged. That's all.
Katie, thank you for being here. Eric Post, and then I will conclude.
Thank you, Senator. First of all, I didn't think it was possible to moderate a panel with 20 people, but you did it, so congratulations. Very well done. It was a really sobering conversation for me as someone who's not directly involved in this issue on a day-to-day basis, but certainly is involved in many respects. I just wanted to say that, and it's possible to end up on a hopeful note, because everything we've been saying has been quite negative, and it just depicting the problem and some possible solutions. But on a federal level, things I believe are changing with social media companies, and the Communications Decency Act is being considered by Congress. It's something that Democrats and Republicans actually agree upon, that we need to change some language and make social media companies more accountable. So I know that AJC was involved with getting Facebook and Instagram to remove Holocaust denial from their website, and I'm hopeful that this opening for the social media companies will give this community an opportunity to, get their word in and really make change with social media companies.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much. Want to give a shout out to our District Attorney, Madeline Singas, for having Teresa Tebbit here, for Commissioner Ryder for having the police department here, for all the different schools and participants here. This was really a special conversation. I know I'm motivated to work on this issue. There's a bill establishing a cyberbullying task force to help advise the governor and the legislature on this. It's Bill 623. I'm hoping to get it passed this year. But there's a lot more to do. And this conversation has given me tremendous ideas, especially about social media companies not having a point of contact that a parent or school could easily be able to get in touch with that company on. That's something that I think we could work on and remedy. But one of the points I want to make, especially to the audience listening to this on Facebook Live or through the Senate website, is you don't have to be a state senator or involved in government to take initiative here. If you want to be a parent and have Katie Schumacher or the DA's office at your school to talk to parents, that could easily be arranged. If you want to have peer-to-peer groups and know what they're like, we have lots of great people on this call to help bring them to your area. And if you think that there's an institution that is not being as responsive as possible, you have friends on this panel who will help you reach out. We have to work together as a community to stem the tide on cyberbullying, but I'm confident that if we work together and treat it with the gravity with which it deserves, we could succeed and make a lot of progress. So thank you all to this expert panel for joining me. Thank you to the audience for listening, and let's go make progress on this critical issue. Be safe and have a good break next week. Bye.